Hey everyone, I wanted to walk you through figure 7.2 in your book. So we have a learning objective related to this figure. It's about understanding the human life cycle, or this diploid dominant life cycle, and then being able to compare and contrast that with the other two types of life cycles, sexual life cycles. So the haploid dominant and then alternation of generations. So let's start by making sure everybody is familiar with this diploid dominant life cycle, which is common in animals. So humans make sperm cells and egg cells, which are also called gametes, through a process of meiosis, which you are going to learn a lot more about in Chapter 7. This is a reduction division that takes our diploid cells from our bodies that have two copies of each chromosomes and just grabs one of each homologous pair. So these gametes just have 23 chromosomes, one from each pair. So they're showing us just 3 here to simplify it, but these are haploid cells. They just have one copy of each. Then we're showing fertilization happening. So this sperm nucleus is going to fuse with the nucleus of this egg cell. Then we see a diploid zygote right here. So now we can see that it has one red and one blue copy of each chromosome. So it is a diploid cell with 3 homologous pairs. Humans really have 23 pairs of homologous chromosomes in their cells, but I guess that was too many to jam into this illustration. Last week you learned about the process of mitosis, that division that creates clones of cells. This zygote is going to divide and divide and divide and divide and divide by mitosis to create these multicellular adults that we see over here in brown. The multicellular adults are going to mature and eventually, in their germ cells within the testes for males and the ovaries for females, once again, they will create gametes, sperm in case of the males, and eggs in case of the females through meiosis, this reduction division. So this life cycle, our life cycle, we see that it's sort of this alternation between fertilization and meiosis, and most of the cells in the life cycle are diploid. The gametes are the only haploid cells. That's different from what we see in organisms like fungi that reproduce sexually. They have a haploid dominant life cycle. This is pretty confusing, and we'll definitely get into more detail about this when we study the fungus. But what I want you to see is that this nuclear fusion is a lot like fertilization, and it's making these diploid cells that we see here. These diploid cells immediately undergo meiosis to produce haploid cells. So everything on this side of the diagram in the fungus, almost everything that you see is haploid. That's why this is a haploid dominant life cycle. So the only diploid cell is the zygote. What I want to point out, though, is that nuclear fusion, which is kind of like fertilization, and meiosis are still these two critical parts of this life cycle. So you have to, in sexual reproduction, we're fusing genetic information from two different organisms. We can see that here, these two hyphae are growing towards each other. So we call that a nuclear fusion instead of fertilization. And then in order to get ready to do it again, meiosis is going to be the reduction division that creates haploid cells again. And then those haploid cells are going to fuse. So it's this sort of balance of fusing haploid cells and then making a diploid cell and then making more haploid cells through meiosis. We see that in the plants too. So there's fertilization, which will make a diploid zygote, which goes on to make the sporophyte plant, which is usually what you think of when you think of a plant. So these are daffodils and trees and ferns like we see here. They're going to make spores through meiosis. So that reduction division makes haploid spores. What's weird about plants is the spores go on to make another plant. a little haploid plant called a gametophyte that makes the gametes. So they're sort of like an intermediate step here. Like in our life cycle, the diploid organism just makes the gametes. But in alternation of generations, the diploid organism, the sporophyte, makes spores through meiosis. They germinate to make another organism, the gametophyte, which then makes the gametes. So I don't want you to be concerned about the details of these different life cycles, alternation of generations, and the haploid dominant life cycle. I just want you to see the importance of balancing fertilization, the fusion of the haploid cells from two different organisms, and meiosis, the creation of haploid cells in all sexual life cycles. I do want you to be familiar with the human sexual life cycle, and I imagine you probably already are pretty familiar with that one compared to the others. Okay, thanks for listening.